welcome back to Cheap Lazy Vegan. Today I have the very highly requested tofu video for you guys. Woo! I did ask you guys if you wanted a tofu video, and many of you said yes, because apparently most people don't know what to do with tofu. So hopefully I'm here to guide you along the way. I am Asian, so I feel like that itself is a qualification, you know. Asian people, we love tofu. I've been eating tofu pretty much as long as I can remember. I can't remember ever not eating tofu. Tofu is a very big part of Korean cuisine as well as Chinese, Japanese, and we just love this stuff, you know. Hoping to give you guys some good advice, some good tips, and I don't know, let's just see what happens, okay? I personally think tofu is one of the best inventions ever. It is just such a genius thing. This big block of random white soybean thing somehow can transform into so many different things. It is awesome, it is great. I'm gonna talk about this for a pretty long time. Homegirl loves tofu in every shape and size, every form. I could eat it like, I could just eat this like straight out of the package, okay? But I do know kind of why some people don't like it. I understand it's like a texture issue. The main problem people have is that tofu has, I guess, that kind of, I don't want to say spongy-like texture, but kind of that not meaty, but also not super soft texture, and it's kind of weird. I can kind of get that. If you're not used to that, I understand. Now I'm going to talk about how to kind of mitigate that, how to cook tofu in ways that doesn't necessarily have that texture. So I know I'm probably going to get some comments about the health risks of tofu. Now, I am not your doctor or nutritionist or dietitian or any sort of professional in that manner, and I have no idea what to tell you, okay? I personally do not believe that tofu is bad for you. That's just my personal belief. I think as long as maybe you use non-GMO soy, I don't believe that tofu is harmful. We've eaten tofu as Asians, we've eaten tofu for a very long time, and we're also known to be quite healthy. So I don't know what to tell you guys. I'm sure if you eat way too much of it, then it might cause some problems. But again, I'm not here to argue with you, just putting that out there. I know that I will get some comments on it. That's why I'm addressing it right now. I'm still probably gonna get some comments on it, but that's okay. So let's talk about tofu. Let's talk about the different kinds of tofu. There are There are so many different kinds of tofu. Usually it's just kind of a definition of how much water content is in the tofu itself and how the texture is going to be. So I'm sure you kind of have an idea, but in case you don't, we're gonna just kind of go through it, okay? So generally, tofu comes in various forms of firmness. This right here is extra soft tofu. This is a Korean brand. It is called Sun Tofu. Ooh, I just spat. Anyways, this is extra soft tofu. Extra soft is just that. It's extra soft. It's super custardy, it's creamy, and this is not something that you want to try to fry, okay? This is very high in water content. This is great for multiple things. I think some of the best ways you can use it is to make a soup or a stew out of it. I already have a recipe on a very delicious Korean dish called sundubu-jjigae, which is basically extra soft, which is basically soft tofu stew, and it's super popular in Korea. It is so delicious and I love it so much, and I'm using this tofu in that. So if you want to see that video and that recipe, I'll link that down below. You can make that, or you can make other kinds of soups and just throw this in. It kind of has like an eggy, like very smooth custardy texture. I don't even know how to describe it, but it's super smooth, super yummy to me anyway. So it is very good, okay? And you can, of course, use it for other things. You can use it for things like smoothies. You can throw some of this into a smoothie and it will give that smoothie a very nice, creamy, smooth texture, and it also has a nice kick of protein if you don't want to use protein powder. You could also make desserts with this, puddings. You could also use this to make dressing or any type of nice creamy sauce. The options are endless, my friends. Now, obviously, like I said, this is not to be fried, okay? This is just going to break in your hand. So, yeah. The next thing after extra soft tofu. What do you think it is, guys? It is soft tofu. Now, I do not have soft tofu with me, but you can kind of imagine what it is. Now, soft tofu is just a slightly more firm than extra soft tofu. It usually comes in a little container like this one. And again, it's great for soups. It's probably what you'll find in like miso soup, you know, those little cute little cubes of tofu that you find in like Asian soups. That's most likely going to be soft tofu. It is possible to like cut it up into like cubes, whereas this is just kind of like basically like a custard. Like, I don't even, there really is no way that you can kind of shape this thing because it's just so soft. It's just going to break if you try to cut it. Whereas soft tofu, you can definitely cut it. And again, you can kind of use it interchangeably with extra soft tofu. It's just going to have a slightly firmer texture, but it's pretty much going to be a very similar style. You're not going to want to fry it or bake soft tofu. That's just not a good idea, you know. Next, I have here, well, this says firm tofu, but I don't buy it. In my opinion, this is more likely extra firm tofu, but this is a Korean brand, and us Koreans, like, I don't know, to us, like, this is probably firm because Korean tofu tends to be, like, not super extra firm because we don't really care if it's extra firm. I don't know if that makes sense. I feel like because in the West, they don't like this kind of soft tofu texture. They make it more firm, whereas in Korea, like, we're used to kind of that tofu texture, so we don't mind it. So this is, like, supposed to be firm, but in Western standards, this is probably medium firm. Does that make sense? Medium firm is the nice middle ground. Now, you can do a lot with medium firm tofu because, again, like I said, it is pretty much the middle ground between firm and soft. You can fry medium firm tofu. It might break more easily, but you can pan fry it. You can put it into an air fryer or even deep fry it. You can bake it. You can do all of these things, but you could also, you know, put it into a nice creamy sauce, and you could blend it up and make it super kind of creamy if you add maybe a little bit of liquid into it. So you can kind of do a lot with medium firm tofu, I find, but it's also kind of one of those things that people probably hate the most because it's kind of just not perfectly firm, but it's also not soft enough to put it into like smoothies. So I feel like, I don't know, to me it's great, but I don't know, it depends on what you're using it for. But I use medium firm tofu quite a lot. I have pan fried medium firm tofu, and there are ways to make it like kind of nice and crispy, like almost like firm tofu. We'll talk about that. And then of course there's firm and extra firm, which again is kind of interchangeable. It's just extra firm is extra firm. You can already kind of tell by the packaging, the fact that it's not packaged like this, the fact that it's packaged like this, it already tells you that it's going to be a lot more firm and it's not going to break as easily. Now, it just means that there's less water and it's more densely packed than medium firm or soft tofu, and this is going to be what you want to use, extra firm tofu or firm tofu, if you're trying to make it into like a nice kind of meaty, like chewy texture, okay? If you want that kind of crispy, meaty texture, then you are looking for the firm or extra firm tofu, because it just basically means there's just less water content in this stuff, which means it's obviously going to be a firmer, more solid texture. You know what I'm saying? And then this right here is the love of my life. This is smoked tofu, people. Now this is, I think this is a Western invention, although I'm probably wrong actually. I just made that up. This is more expensive generally than other kinds of tofu because it's been smoked. And basically it's literally just tofu that has gone through some sort of smoking process, and it usually comes in like a kind of very firm package, and there's no water really. Okay, there's no water content in this. It pretty much reminds me of ham. It's kind of like vegan ham. I've talked about this so many times at this point, but this is something that I can literally just eat just straight out of this container. I can just chop it up, put it into a sandwich, and just eat it. And I think people that don't like tofu may still like this because it has a very kind of ham-like texture, and it's not, I feel like the texture is very different from tofu, or like, you know, this kind of tofu. So if you don't like tofu, maybe give smoked tofu a try because it has the flavor and it has the firmer texture. So Smoked tofu is your friend, okay? I'm telling you, smoked tofu has changed my life.
Many of you guys have asked me where I find smoked tofu, and obviously it depends on where you are, but I generally find mine at a health food store, an Asian supermarket, or just a regular supermarket if I'm lucky. I also forgot to mention silken tofu as a type of tofu. Silken tofu is very, very smooth and custardy in consistency. It's used quite often in dessert recipes like puddings. They are definitely probably closest to soft tofu. You do not want to mistake silken tofu for regular tofu. If something calls for extra firm silken tofu, that is not the same thing as extra firm tofu. And of course, there are many different brands of tofu around the world, so they are all going to be a little bit different. The consistency and the water content will be different, so try out different brands and see what you like.
Alright guys, now, what is next? Okay. Now let's talk about the different things that you could do with tofu. The options are endless, my friends. I mean, it is just ridiculous how little people understand about the possibilities of tofu. What the hell? So let's just cut open one of these. So this is a very standard packaging of tofu. You know, it comes in this weird like box thing, very traditional. I usually just take a knife. Ooh, that looks giant. Like a freaking, anyways. I just poke it like this and it is going to, the liquid is just going to kind of, you know. So you might want to be at a sink for this. Give me a minute. Okay, so I have just drain the water out, and then you want to give it a nice quick rinse with just cold water. Now, I'm not gonna lie guys, I very often forget to rinse it. But anyways, so this is the firm. It has that kind of sponginess that y'all seem to hate so much. Most likely, maybe you're not gonna use all of this tofu. So if you're not gonna use all of it, I just kind of cut however much I'm not using. Put it into a little container that you can close, and what you want to do is you want to fill it up with nice cold clean water, and then you cover it up and then you leave it in the fridge. Now you want to eat it in the next probably 2 or 3 days, and I think good practice is to change the water every day, but I forget to do that, so I don't know. Anyways, you could also freeze it, and what freezing does to tofu is that it actually changes the texture a little bit, and apparently it makes it more like meaty. What is going on out there? It makes the texture more meaty because it kind of expels more water out of the tofu, and it also apparently absorbs more flavor. So if you don't like the texture of tofu, then I highly recommend trying to freeze it. Now, let's cut up this tofu.
And when I slice my tofu, I generally like to cut it pretty thin, but not too thin. That doesn't help at all, does it? Maybe about like 1/3 of an inch, or maybe 1/2 an inch, maybe around that size.
Now, some of you may have noticed that I don't press my tofu. I very, very rarely press tofu. I've probably pressed tofu 10 times in my life. I don't press tofu. I hate pressing tofu. I just don't see the point in pressing tofu, because the whole point, I feel like, of pressing tofu is to make the texture like more firm and like more meaty and stuff. And because I don't mind non-meaty texture, like I just don't want to press it. And there are ways of cooking tofu that doesn't necessarily require you to press it. So I'll show you what I do with this so you can see what happens when you cook it without pressing it. You don't have to do it. Save yourself the time, the energy. So the trick is, number one, you should probably be using a non-stick pan. Tofu does tend to stick, especially in the beginning. So what you don't want is your tofu to stick, because then it's not going to fry properly. So I'm using a non-stick pan, and I have my heat on about medium to medium high heat. You don't want the heat too strong, because we are going to be frying the tofu for a relatively long amount of time. And if your heat is too strong, it's going to burn your tofu. So I have here this oil spray thing that I just got from Amazon. This just allows me to use some oil but without using too much oil. So I'm just going to spray just a few sprays. And I'm just going to heat that up a little bit. So I'm going to be adding the medium firm tofu. And the trick that I find is to not move this around. Let it do the work. Let it cook on each side for a while. So I'm talking at least 5 minutes on medium-high heat, maybe even a little bit longer, maybe 5 to 8 minutes I would say, until it's nicely golden brown. Trust the process, let it do the magic, and when you turn it around, it's going to be nice and crispy and golden brown. For comparison, I'm gonna add in some strips of extra firm tofu. So as you can see here, this is a lot more firm. You can feel the difference in texture. I'm just gonna stick a couple of these in there. And I normally don't like to season anything until it's completely cooked, but you can at this point put some salt and add other seasonings at this point if you'd like. So as you guys have seen, I did not press the tofu. You don't have to press it, okay? That is all I'm trying to say. You don't have to press tofu. So right now the tofu has been cooking for about 5 minutes on medium heat, medium-high heat-ish. I feel like it's almost not even done yet, but here we go. Let's just turn these things around. That was the medium firm. This is the firm. Now this is what you're looking for, that kind of brownish golden color. And then you want to leave it here for another, I don't know, 4 to 5 minutes until it's nice and crispy on both sides. Now, the longer you cook it, you want to maybe turn the heat down a little bit, and the longer you cook it, it's going to give it more of that crispy outer texture, okay? So I can feel here the extra firm tofu is a lot more firm, and then this one still has a little bit of that softness on it. So with the medium firm, I'm gonna wanna cook it for a bit longer if I want that more meaty texture, and then this, you don't have to cook it for as long. Because I didn't press it, you may have to cook it for a bit longer because I need to expel more water out as I cook.
And of course, there are many different ways of flavoring your tofu. I'm just going to show you a very simple way of flavoring it. I'm just using some store-bought teriyaki sauce. This is very thick teriyaki sauce, so I'm just going to add a bit of water to thin it out a bit so it's easy to toss the tofu around and make sure to coat everything. I'm also, of course, adding some sriracha. What else is new? And we're just going to mix that well. And once that is nicely mixed and your tofu is completely pan-fried on each side, nicely golden brown, you're going to want to throw that sauce into the mixture and toss your tofu around. Now make sure at this point that your heat is at a low heat because the sauce will caramelize very quickly. So you want to make sure the heat is either off or just completely at the lowest heat. And then there is your tofu. If you cooked it enough on each side, the texture should be very firm and crispy on the outside. And the sauce, of course, you can make different types of sauces as well. There are many different ways of cooking tofu. I'll get to more in a little bit. So as an experiment, I froze some extra firm tofu and this is what it looked like. It is going to turn yellow. That's very normal, so don't be alarmed. And then of course I thawed it out in the fridge afterwards, and then as you can see here, you can easily squeeze that water out, and the texture is a lot firmer than before, so it's actually a lot easier to squeeze the water out without the tofu breaking, which is very cool. And because I heard that freezing and thawing out your tofu will help absorb more flavor, I decided to try and marinate the tofu pieces. So I created a simple marinade with just soy sauce, rice vinegar, and sesame oil. And then I placed it on a plate and placed the tofu pieces on it. And guys, look how fast the tofu absorbs the liquid, the marinade. Look at this. It literally absorbs it almost instantly. How amazing is that? Oh my god. So if you're looking to marinate your tofu and give it more flavor, I highly recommend freezing the tofu first and then thawing it out and then marinating it because it makes such a big difference. So I highly recommend trying this out, and the flavors obviously got super infused into the tofu and it tasted really good. And here are just some of the things you could make with tofu. Give your smoothies an extra protein kick and some creamy consistency with some extra soft tofu. You can also use silken tofu, you can use soft tofu. Just make sure you add in lots of other things in there to mask the tofu flavor, and you've got yourself a beautiful smoothie. And of course, scrambled tofu is an option for you. Use different types of vegetables, different seasonings like cumin, nutritional yeast, garlic powder, and turmeric, which gives it a nice yellow look. And you can even microwave your scrambled tofu. And yes, there is a recipe video on how I microwave my tofu, so check that out. I also have a breakfast video where I use tofu in a variety of different ways, so I'll link that down below as well. Soft and extra soft tofus work super well in soups and stews, especially of course Asian style soups and stews. I love the consistency of extra soft tofu inside my soup. It gives almost like an eggy like consistency. It's super smooth and I love it. Definitely try out some different recipes. You can try out my soft tofu stew recipe, which is a very popular Korean dish, and I have a video on it of course. If you want to make your tofu super crispy on the outside and delicious, you could of course coat your tofu with cornstarch or other types of coatings like breadcrumbs or maybe even almond flour to make it nice and crispy. I do have a recipe where I make some sweet chili tofu and of course some teriyaki tofu as well, so I'll link that video down below. Another way of making your tofu crispy without actually deep frying it is actually to coat it and air fry it. I love my air fryer. As you can see here, this is just simply coated tofu that has been air fried and very minimal oil has been used, and then I am just tossing it in this beautiful sauce. I have this recipe in my air fryer video. If you don't have an air fryer, check it out and see if you might want one because it is awesome. It is bomb and I seriously love it so much. Doesn't that look delicious? It's so crispy and you don't have to fry it. It is simply air fried. And of course, you can always throw your tofu in a blender with various different spices and sauces and seasonings, and it could create beautiful dressings, beautiful cheeses, beautiful sauces. Here I am showing you my tofu ricotta cheese, which I use so often in lasagnas, and it is seriously the bomb. It's so good. I fed this to so many people, and everyone loves the tofu ricotta part. It seriously can fool people, guys. So I would definitely recommend trying to make some delicious spreads or cheeses out of tofu. Another option is to take a softer or silken tofu and create a very delicious pasta sauce that is nice and creamy. Again, recipe video is linked down below. And of course, I've got some delicious mouth-watering tofu recipes in my ebook, such as a super yummy vegan tzatziki sauce recipe, a mapo tofu recipe, eggless egg salad, a spicy Korean tofu recipe, and much more. So if you haven't checked out the ebook yet, check out the link down below to get your hands on it.
I'm hoping that all of this makes sense to you guys. I hope this was helpful in any way, shape, or form. Try out different methods of making tofu. I guarantee you there's at least one way of eating tofu that you may enjoy. So do not fret, people. Tofu is amazing. Check out my tofu recipes. Maybe I'll start a playlist of my recipes involving tofu. That is it for my video. I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you found it helpful. Please give it a thumbs up if you did find it helpful. And if you are new here, don't forget to click the subscribe button so you don't miss videos in the future. And I will see you guys in my next video. Thank you guys for watching. Bye!